it's Day Day, aka the Listening Midwife, and today I thought I would talk to you guys about traveling while pregnant. So, this is something that a lot of women do. I did it in both of my pregnancies quite early on, but I thought maybe you might want to have some tips and advice about that. So, here goes. So, I work generally I'm a preterm birth specialist midwife, so that's like my day job. So I work with women who have risk factors for preterm birth, premature birth. So that's babies born before 37 weeks. And one of the questions that does come up in our clinics when I work with my consultant obstetricians is it safe for me to travel, go on holiday? Usually most people mean abroad, or, it might be local in the UK, but I just thought, actually, yeah, this is a question that comes up quite frequently. So why not explore it? How are you planning to get there? And by that, I mean, are you going to be needing to go on a plane? Are you going to be going on a train? How long is that journey? And, how long is it going to take you to get there? So if you're traveling on a plane, there's a few things you need to think about. Do you need to get flight stockings? So for some women, if it's a long haul flight, so anything more than really 4 or 5 hours, then you need to be thinking about getting the stockings, and they're called TED stockings basically, and the stockings are there to try and reduce your risk of blood clots. They help with the circulation to bring the blood flow back to your heart and just keep things moving so that your blood doesn't kind of stay too stagnant and increase your risk of blood clots in your lower limbs. So TED stockings always a good idea if it's going to be a long flight. I would also check in with your consultant, because if you are consultant led, you might be low risk, in which case then same advice applies. Get your TED stockings, drink lots of water, stay well hydrated. But if you have risk factors, some of those risk factors might include a higher risk of blood clots. So it might be quite important to discuss that with your consultant or your healthcare team to see if it's safe for you to travel. If you have conditions such as lupus, or if you've had a family history of blood clots, then actually it's really important that you have that discussion with your obstetric team to decide, is it safe for you to travel? Do you need special injections for blood thinning and things like that? So that kind of needs to be factored into the decision making about whether it's safe to travel in pregnancy. So one of the other things to think about as well, as I mentioned, your long haul flights, are you going to be on a plane for quite a long time, in which case getting up every couple of hours to stretch your legs, move around, just doing little ankle rotations every few hours, or just going to the toilet, because you're probably going to need to go to the toilet because you're pregnant. And when you're pregnant, you pee lots anyway. So getting up, stretching your legs, drinking lots of water to make sure you stay hydrated. Those are kind of just really simple things that you can do to help you with reducing your risk of blood clots. So, one of the other things that we would advise you to think about when you are planning a holiday when you're pregnant is, how pregnant are you going to be when you are traveling? Now, the reason why you need to think about this is because if it's really early in the first trimester, second trimester, then, that's okay. You can travel at that time if you feel that it's appropriate and if you kind of have taken into account the risk factors and all of that. But I think it's really important to think about, will the airline be okay with you traveling? So some airlines want to have, what's called a fit to fly letter, that your GP can arrange for you, or your obstetric team can arrange for you. And this just says that, your pregnancy is okay, it's safe for you to fly. And generally, if you're flying sort of later on in pregnancy, that's when they tend to want that letter. So they don't really want women flying past 35, 36 weeks, because they don't want to deliver babies on the plane. And, that can happen. So I'm sure we've all seen the news where there's one case or another of a woman giving birth on an airplane. They kind of get a little bit tense about flying when you're quite heavily pregnant, understandably. So another thing to consider, as I said, if you're traveling kind of in the first, second trimester, are you having any nausea or vomiting? I'll tell you a story later about that, and my experience of nausea and vomiting on airplanes. Stay tuned. But yeah, if you are still having sort of nausea and vomiting, you're still needing to take tablets for that. If you've had hyperemesis and it's kind of on the tail end of that, but you still might be having, vomiting, think about whether or not you want to be on a plane or even a train, or, anywhere far from home. But yeah, I mean, it's up to you. If you feel comfortable with that, and you feel like things are on the up and you're feeling better and you want to go away and just have some time with you and your family before the baby comes, go for it. It's great. We love it. So, one of the other things that I would urge you to think about is, what is the healthcare like in the country that you're going to? So, the reason why this is important is because depending on your gestation and how far along you are, if you have any concerns, for example, you start to have bleeding, then you want to go somewhere that you feel actually the healthcare is going to be very good, and that you're going to be well looked after, and that your pregnancy is also going to be well looked after. So it's important that you feel confident in the healthcare service in the country that you're going to. So it's really important that you do your research, find out what the healthcare is like there, what access to healthcare is like over there as well. In the EU, we have the global health card, health insurance card. So make sure that if you are going to the EU, then you have got one of those cards, because it's really important to make sure that you have sort of good access to care as well. And then think about, if you needed to stay as an inpatient for a little while, like what are the financial implications going to be? So definitely making sure that you have good holiday insurance that is valid, and also takes into account things like if you have any pre-existing conditions. So always read the T's and C's, because actually some might say that they won't cover you, or you'll need additional cover on top of that if you have a pre-existing condition. Let's say if you were diabetic prior to traveling, then they might want some kind of additional insurance in place on top of that. But really important that you do have the right insurance, and that you make sure that you take all your insurance details and paperwork with you. Also really important that you take your maternity records with you. As a lot of units are now going digital across the UK, this might mean that you need to take a printout. So if nothing else, I definitely advise you take your scan reports and your blood result, all those blood reports that you have, because that will help you if you need to go into this kind of emergency care in the area that you're in when you're abroad. So think about those kind of details. One of the things I like to say, so with our cohort of women that we care for in my preterm clinic, uh, we get really nervous when women fly around the cusp of viability, which is that kind of 22 to 24 weeks, because if if anything happens and you do have your baby over there, like what is the healthcare going to be like for your baby if your baby's born at that age and that gestation? So I tend to prefer it if women go a little bit later on, like after 28 weeks, because most units can manage a 28-weeker well in the developed countries. So, but I can't dictate when women travel. But yeah, that's my preference if they go a little bit later, because actually if their babies do come when they're abroad, which is very, very rare, but it can happen. So it's about, is the healthcare good enough and set up enough that actually your baby would be well cared for if your baby was born over there. Because that can have some big implications if your baby is born abroad. Trying to get your baby back, you've got to get the passports, they've got to be fit to fly, thinking about vaccinations, there's lots to think about. For most people, this is not that, it's not that deep. Like, you're just going to go away on holiday and you're going to come back. But I had an episode of bleeding when I was pregnant, and when I was in another country, and I had to think about, right, what do I do? And I was really early on in my pregnancy, and I just sort of was like, well, okay, I guess I should maybe go to hospital, and just like, when is the right time? Who do I call? I don't speak the language. That's another thing. Make sure that you understand some of the basic language as well. That might help. Those little guidebooks are quite good, but it's really important that you make sure that you can communicate effectively with the people in that country. A lot of people speak English these days when you go abroad, but obviously you're going to be going into the healthcare setting. It can be a little bit more complex if you do end up needing some support abroad. So those are just a few things to think about. I hope that gives a bit of insight. Just thinking about always staying well hydrated, reduce your risk of blood clots if you're going on a long flight, get your TED stockings. Those are really good anyway, generally throughout pregnancy, especially if you're pregnant during the summertime and things get a little bit more swollen. The more you're on your feet, it's never a bad thing to have those sexy stockings. But yeah, just make sure that you have good health insurance. If you're going to the EU, make sure you get your global health insurance card as well. And yeah, have a lovely holiday. Let me tell you a story about what happened with me and when I was pregnant with my daughter. Shout out to all the girl mums out there because they're wild. So, her name is Marissa. She is a force of nature. She can take over the world. I know it. So, when I was pregnant, when I found out I was pregnant with her, I had already booked a family holiday. So, me, my parents, my brother, like my husband, everyone, my kid, my son, everyone, we're all going together to the Canary Islands. So, we're really excited. It was going to be over Christmas holiday. So I had a scan like the week before. In fact, I think it was like a few days before we flew. And they were like, yeah, you're 6 weeks pregnant. It was a colleague I worked with. He was great. He was like, yeah, there's a little heartbeat. So excited. So we were like, great, wonderful, safe to fly now because I know she's there. Didn't know it was she, but she was there. She was all good. So then we got to the airport. All good, all good. Now, bearing in mind, when I flew with my son, I was about 15, 16 weeks pregnant and I had thrown up and my mum was with me. And shout out to my mum because she's just my rock. So I had an episode on the plane where I had vomited. I didn't make it to the toilet in time, but my mum she was ready with the bags. Like she just, I don't know, that mum kind of intuition. She was ready with the bags. I was there like chucking up in the bag in the plane. So I had that in my mind. My mum had that in her mind. She had the wet wipes. She had the bags. She was like, you're sitting on the aisle. I said, okay, it's all good. It's fine. It was a one-off. It's not going to happen again. Let me tell you what happened. So Marissa, bless her little heart that was beating at 6 weeks. We got on the plane, everything was fine. I said, I'm not gonna eat too much because like that's what happened the last time round. So I'm just gonna I think I had a cup of tea and I was like, I'm just gonna sleep because I'm tired. I'm gonna sleep. It was one of those early 6, 7 a.m. flights, and it's only like 3 hours, 4 hours to the Canary Islands. So I was like, oh good. Fell asleep. Woke up and I was like, ooh, I'm not feeling so good. I think maybe I should just head to the bathroom now. Let's just head to the bathroom now. Let's be early and get there so I can, if it's coming out, then I'll be there. So I got up. I was walking through the aisles, and guess what was in the aisles? Yes, you guessed it. The stewardess and her trolley. The stewardess and her trolley was standing between me and the toilets. So, and at that point, I started to feel a little bit not great. So I was like, okay, sorry. I got towards them and I was like, just would you excuse me, please? I need to get to the bathroom. And I don't actually remember the end of that conversation because I woke up on the floor in the aisle, mouthful of vomit, and my mum screaming, Day Day, Day Day, wake up. Mum's tugging at my hair, tugging my hair. So at that point, I realised I had fainted and I had projectile vomited on my way down as I fainted. And so as I sort of came round to consciousness, I realised what was going on, and I was like, the mouthful of vomit, there was vomit on the sides, I could feel the vomit in my hair. Oh, it was a mess. But that wasn't the worst bit. The worst bit was as I sort of looked, I could see a lot of vomit on the floor next to me, and somebody's shoes, who's the person was wearing their shoes, was soaked in vomit. So I sort of thought, please let this plane crash. Obviously, I didn't want the plane to crash, but in that moment where it looked like I had vomited on somebody and their shoes, and the vomit was seeping into their shoes, and I was lying on the floor, and I could hear it on the tannoy going, is there anyone who is medically trained? I was like, please, dear God, this is not how I wanted it to be. Where was my husband? Nowhere to be seen. I don't know where he was. My mum, though, bless her, she had me. She was there, like, lifting up my head at an awkward angle, trying to stop me from choking on the vomit. And I was like, Mum, I'm awake now. I'm awake. You can let go of my hair and my head and all of that. And then, so anyway, long story short, the air hostess was like, is she okay? Does she have any conditions? Eventually I hear my husband should rock up quietly, just go, yeah, she's pregnant. And they were like, oh, okay, how far along? And it was like 6 weeks. And I was just like, oh, I can't do this. I can't get up off this floor knowing I vomited on people and now make my way to the bathroom. Anyway, I had to do it. So eventually I got myself up. my mum's helping me just like clean up my face so that there wasn't too much shame left on my face. And as I got up, I saw the carnage of vomit that had soaked about 2 or 3 rows of people in the aisle. So embarrassed, so embarrassed. So I made it to the bathroom. My mum was just there. My mum spent the rest of the next hour and a half of the flight cleaning vomit out of my hair, my jumper, like everything, and the passengers as well, their bags and the shoes. The shoes could not be saved. So RIP to those shoes. Anyway, so I had to then eventually make my way back to my seat because we had to land the plane. I had to sort of just go, sorry, everyone, sorry, as I walked past and saw it. And my parents were kind enough to swap seats with the people whose chairs I had vomited on. So basically, if you're going to fly when you're pregnant, make sure that you take a bag, take some spare clothes, and just, you never know what's going to happen, man. Because I was not expecting that. I hadn't even started to have the sickness or anything yet. So that was wild. Hopefully that won't happen to you. It'll be fine. You'll be absolutely fine. Don't worry about that. That's just me and my crazy. Basically, if I fly when I'm pregnant, then I vomit. So that's it. That's the only time I vomit in my pregnancies. On planes, on people. Okay. So yeah, so I got on a plane, had a bit of an episode with that. We're going to park that. Anyway, got to the Gran Canaria. It was lovely. It's a place we'd been to before, so we knew the layout of the land really well. Actually, I even knew where the local health centre was. Always do that. Always find out where your local kind of emergency care unit is, and just so you can feel that if you need to go there, you're sorted. Good. Anyway, so at the hotel, it's all good. We have our Christmas dinner. We knock something together, my mum and I. And yeah, it was lovely. Me, my son, my husband, we had our room. It was all lovely. So then Christmas night, I think it was, my husband's sleeping, my son's sleeping, and I go to the toilet to wee, and blood is coming out. Like a lot of blood is coming out. And I had a subchorionic hematoma with my son in my previous pregnancy, and that is where there's like a little bit of bleeding behind where the placenta is embedded into the uterus. So you get occasionally like where the blood kind of comes away and you bleed a little bit. And for the most part, for most people, it's fine. So I thought maybe that's what it is again. Maybe I've got another subchorionic hematoma in this pregnancy. So I was like, okay, but it was quite a lot of blood, so I was a bit anxious. And if you've had bleeding in pregnancy, it's always scary, always scary. I'm a midwife and it was scary. Like it doesn't make it less scary. And it was fresh red blood, so I was like, okay. So I sat on the toilet, I wiped, it stopped, I went back to sleep. But while I lay there, obviously I was anxious, and then I dozed off and I woke up and I could feel that I was wet again. So I went to the toilet, and as I sat on the toilet, instead of what you would think is wee, it was blood coming out, like streaming out of me. And it was like midnight. So I was like, what am I supposed to do? I'm in a foreign country and I'm bleeding and I'm freaking out a little bit. I don't know what to do. So obviously, that this story ended happily because I got Marissa, who is now 4.5 years old. And yeah, it was, but at the time, I didn't know that was how this story was going to end. So I was there, heart racing, sat on the toilet, dripping blood out. And I thought, surely this is it. I'm miscarrying. And I was terrified. I was heartbroken. And I thought, I can't wake my husband because what is he going to do? He can do absolutely nothing about this. And all it will do is worry him. And if he's up, he's probably going to wake my son up. And my son was like, I don't know, 4 years old at the time. So he just nobody needed to kind of be in this with me. So I was sat there alone in the bathroom bleeding. And it settled down, and then I went back to sleep, and that happened a couple of times. And I thought, geez, man, I'm losing a bit of blood here. Like, just keeping my wits about me, because I was like, well, I think I'm fine, but I don't know what else to do. Like, I don't think I need an ambulance, but, even if I needed an ambulance, I'm in a foreign country. Like, I don't really know, like, I knew you just ring 111 or 112. See, I need to know that. I'll put a caption on the top. But yeah, like I was like, I know there's an emergency number which is kind of universal across Europe and UK, so like I could do that, right? And but then I was like, I don't think it's that bad yet. So anyway, it did stop, and I went to sleep, and I just remember texting my mum, who was in another room in the hotel, and I just said, I think I'm having a miscarriage. And I knew she wouldn't get the message, and I hoped she wouldn't. I hoped she wouldn't get the message, but I just didn't know what else to do. So I just, went to sleep and woke up. And so I woke up, and my mum was rang me, and she was like, "Are you okay? What's going on?" And I said, "I think everything's settled for now, but yeah, it was a lot of blood throughout, like intermittently throughout the night." And bless her, gosh, if you heard the other story, you just know that my mum's amazing. So she had gone to the shops like at the crack of dawn, and she'd got me like pads, big ones, small ones, just all different size pads. And she came, and she was just like, "Oh, Day Day, come." Like she just was hugging me, and I was like, "I don't know what to do." I was like, "I don't think there's anything I need to do because the bleeding has now settled. So there's no point." And we were umming and ahhing, should I go to the health centre or should I not? What should I do? And I said, if I've miscarried, I've miscarried. Like, we just have to keep going. And we're on holiday, as long as I'm not hemorrhaging, let's just enjoy the rest of the holiday as best we can. And obviously I told my husband at this point, so, he was kept in the loop. But we just thought, let's just kind of try and enjoy the family time together. If we've miscarried, then when we get back to the UK, I can go and get checked out. And yeah, so that was it. I think in the end, after that, the next day I went like parasailing, because I was like, well, if I miscarried, then at least I can say I've parasailed and enjoyed my holiday. Yeah. So anyway, we flew back to the UK, and I went for a scan. It was always a holiday, so I think by the time I went, it was like New Year's Eve or like 31st of December. I went for a scan, and oh my gosh, there was a heartbeat. And I burst into tears because I went in there not expecting to actually see a heartbeat at all. I was expecting to see nothing. I was expecting to see an empty uterus. And I was on and off shift, actually. I think it was in between shifts. And I said, I went to the early pregnancy unit, and they said, "Oh, well, obviously there's a waiting time to get an emergency scan." I said, "Just call me. I'm upstairs. So just call me. I'll come down as quick as I can. And, please, 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 I really just want to see what's going on." And they did, and they were amazing. And she scanned me. She's like, "Yeah, that's your baby's heartbeat. Baby's absolutely fine." She said, "Yep, you've got a big old subchorionic hematoma there. That'll be the reason why." So if you know anything about subchorionic hematomas, most of the time they do clear up by the end of the first trimester. So about 12, 13 weeks, they do resolve. Some can continue, but most of them do resolve. And that was the case for me in both of my pregnancies. But boy, was that scary. I have never been so scared in my life. And I can't even imagine what it's like for women who have suffered a miscarriage and kind of had that bleeding. Because I didn't think there was a heartbeat there. With all that bleeding, and there she was. So yeah, I mean, it was a happy ending for me, but I know that that's not always the case. So my heart goes out to anyone who's experienced that and had a miscarriage. Yeah, God bless. Thank you for watching this episode of Women's Health with the Listening Midwife. I am now offering antenatal and postnatal pregnancy support. So if you are interested in having me support you during your journey into parenthood, then please do reach out. Check out the website, which is thelisteningmidwife.co.uk, or email dayday@thelisteningmidwife.co.uk.